ADHD is a word that gets thrown around. What do you think that other entrepreneurs who maybe don't have ADHD or however you want to phrase it, what do you think they're not comfortable putting themselves out there just to get attention? Where do you think they go wrong?
I would consider ADHD to be like my greatest superpower because I'm always thinking outside of the box. Like even when I do my pitches and stuff, I always think about it as like a social media video, because if you can't capture somebody's attention in the first 3 seconds, they're walking away.
You talked about getting outside of your comfort zone. So do you still feel uncomfortable stepping outside of your comfort zone, or have you done enough of it now where it just comes really naturally and you're like, yeah, I'm happy to do it, not a problem?
There's always like the little voice in the back of your head that's like, how is this going to be received? But now it's more so, how is my audience going to receive this?
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm seeing it more from the audience's perspective, because the identity of the brand has already been built to a certain extent, and I do have to be like more strategic about, now that it's kind of the identity already exists, I have to be strategic about what I am willing to add to it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Wednesdays Off podcast. Today, my guest is Maximus Mattuchio. He is the founder of Dirty Bastard Laundry Company. He is a senior for a little bit longer at the University of Tampa, getting ready to graduate. And boy, this kid's on a rocket ship of an entrepreneurial ride. And so I'm happy to introduce him to you all. Max, welcome to the show.
Absolutely, Stavros. I really appreciate you having me. I'm definitely looking forward to, telling you a little bit more about my story and how I started Dirty Bastard. And I know that, we've had a couple conversations before, and you've actually been somewhat of a great mentor for me, and you've given me some good feedback and advice. So I'm looking forward to diving into it.
It's an honor to hear that, man. Here's where I want to start. You are such an inspiration. I remember you just came up to me and a couple of other entrepreneurs and you're like, can I show you my laundry machine? Right. And we were like, what the hell is this kid talking about? And you just started to impress us. And I know you've been doing some competitions. I know you've been winning a lot of competitions. And what I noticed that you've done differently, because I used to teach college entrepreneurship, you kind of picked the right type of project. There's so many student entrepreneurs who pick something that's small, and that's okay, right? It's a learning journey. They pick something or they pick something that's so unrealistic and so out of the possibility that they need to raise, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, you've picked a thing that feels like it's really doable. How did you get there, man? How'd you land on this idea?
So it's been a pretty crazy journey. So I had the experience of working and living on an RV for my entire summer, working as a creative director for Jake Paul. He has a male hygiene brand. So we did 40 states in 50 days, 15,000 miles, just me and 3 other content creators. And we were just making content promoting this deodorant company. So we would wake up in the middle of Idaho and be like, okay, how do we market this deodorant company in Grace, Idaho, which is a town that has, I think, 600 total residents. And we're like, that level of craftiness and, obviously to be able to make deodorant exciting, you have to, do crazy stuff. You have to jump off of stuff. And, we kind of took like the Red Bull approach in our marketing. But, through that experience, it required me to like really dive deeply into the male hygiene space and to understand it like the back of my hand. This is actually a true story. Within a 48-hour period, we participated in batting practice with the Savannah Bananas. We went to the Walmart headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas. I got to sit like a fly on the wall in a meeting with W's buyers, and I didn't know even what they were talking about. They were just going back and forth, and I was just like sitting there just listening to it. Then we went to 4 different frats and sororities at University of Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. And then we filmed a collaboration with Dude Wipes at their headquarters in Chicago. And I was just chatting with their marketing manager, who was like helping us do the collab. It was, so the WRV had a urinal on the back of it, and Dude Wipes has like their little mini pooper. It's like a Mini Cooper with like a little poop on top.
Yeah.
And we just filmed this, like we drove, I think it was like 600 or 700 miles just to film this little video. And our team was like a little bit frustrated with it. I was like, God, because it was a request directly from our CEO. They wanted to do the collaboration. We're like, all right, well, it's, we're gonna have to get from Arkansas.
Drive through the night to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did. But once we got there, we were having a good time, and I was talking to their marketing manager, and I was like, "How have you seen, Dude Wipes grow?" Just making conversation. He's like, "Oh, we just hit $300 million in revenue this year," and I'm more into the content side, so like hearing a number that big, I'm like, "Holy crap!" Like, that's. I mean, at that number, they're probably going to exit for over $1 billion, I'd imagine, within the next couple of years. And I was just thinking about it, and using all of the experience that I had gained this summer, the opportunity to talk to like, thousands of, young male consumers across the country, I just became fascinated with the fact that Dude Wipes has been so wildly successful. And like you said, like, a lot of young entrepreneurs like want to invent something or create something super innovative, but like they just took baby wipes, which have historically been marketed to women and mothers, and put the word dude on it. And, they spoke directly to the young male consumer. Like their brand voice is very, they kind of push the limits a little bit. They'll put up a billboard that, for example, they just did something with, not like with Chipotle, but they put up a big billboard outside of a Chipotle, above the Chipotle, and like pointed down and made some like funny comment about like, call us after you have your Chipotle, or like call us
Right.
or something like that. Like, and they're edgy and they push the limits a little bit. But yeah, and then I started to look at like the whole male hygiene space. I looked at, Dr. Squatch. They just exited for over $1 billion because they made, soap masculine, in a way that, Old Spice was kind of a little bit outdated, and,
Mhm.
they brought like a modern masculine tone to, just washing your body, putting on deodorant and whatnot. And then I looked at Liquid Death, and I said, okay, if you can make water masculine, the demand for water among men and women literally could not be any more equal. It's an essential unit of human, life. Like you can't live without it. So I just started to look at different industries and different categories that, didn't have this masculine identity yet. Cause like I said, I've learned so much this summer, and I've been an entrepreneurship major since I was a freshman. So I knew I didn't want to get a job after I graduated. I wanted to start something. And I'm like, I have to be able to leverage this experience to, build my own company. I mean, I got a behind the curtain view of, how things work in the CPG space. And, I just looked at the laundry detergent industry, or the entire category, and realized that, 35% of the US market is owned by Procter and Gamble. There
Yeah.
are no really, like, there's like a few smaller brands that speak to the male consumer, but in terms of like, big box store, retail, there's no, it's very feminine, very floral, lavender, fresh breeze, spring meadow, like that whole scent lineup is, very heavily marketed towards like mothers and, just women in general. I just started to explore whether or not it was possible, what it would take. And, I realized, like you said, it felt like a massive undertaking. And it kind of has been. I've been doing everything myself.
Mhm.
So it has been a massive undertaking. But in terms of, the capital requirements, it's, obviously there's expenses and you have to buy inventory and whatnot. But it's not like I needed to go out and raise, $5 million to, create some proprietary technology or something. It's like the product exists. It's just the branding is where.
You mentioned the Savannah Bananas, right? And what an interesting story of a brand where their primary objective was to get attention,
Yeah,
right? Like they're before they were like, whether people like us or not is secondary. We're gonna go out with this weird name and just get everybody's attention, and then we'll make them like us by being really, really cool. And I mean, you're here on the podcast in a bow tie and a green shirt and a hat, right? So you seem to have this natural ability to just go out and kind of get attention. Is this something that came? Were you like this as a child? Is this something you learned in your history as a social media person working with influencers? How'd you pick this up?
definitely. So it's actually interesting because when I was younger, my parents would like tell me that like stop like seeking attention or whatever. Like in my class, so I have ADHD too, which I think is, I tell my parents, I'm like, if I consider ADHD to be like my greatest superpower, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking outside of the box. I definitely, you can't even put me inside of the box at this point. But every time I've been, like even growing up, I would, get in trouble in class for, standing out or talking when the teacher was talking, and always doing stuff like that. But I think that social media is a huge aspect of the attention component of Dirty Bastard and like my ability, because even when I do my pitches and stuff, I always think about it as like a social media video, because if you
Hmm.
can't capture somebody's attention in the first 3 seconds, they're walking away. And I think that applies in person too, because, if you see a guy walking around with a green tuxedo, kind of my philosophy was to follow the Savannah Bananas blueprint. And, I kind of just grab like little pieces from each brand that I like and I've seen be successful. But from an attention perspective, at the end of the day, laundry is a very boring task. It's a very boring product. And, you just have, in order to make it fun, you have to do outlandish things. And, somebody approached me and they were like, what if Procter and Gamble were to start a product similar to Dirty Bastard? And I'm like, well, who at Procter and Gamble that's making $200,000 a year is going to push a washing machine around a college campus and dress up like, like PT Barnum every day? Like, they're not going to do that. They're not willing to, capture that attention. And really, they don't need to, because they're making billions of dollars. So, there's no necessity for them to step outside of what they already know and what's been working for them. But yeah, I think it comes somewhat natural to me. I just don't really care what people have to say anymore. And that's been obviously like a journey throughout my life, is like, you know, I've always been, like, for example, when I was, I think in sixth grade, I started like a little vlog YouTube account, and I would vlog every single day. And like, even like my peers would just, like, any middle schooler is just going to say, dumb stuff and
Yeah, yeah.
want to put you down. But, I think at a very early age, I just learned to like do my own thing. And, I think the ADHD definitely plays a big role in that, is because I knew that I was never going to like act the same way as like everybody else in my class. So I just became, comfortable with being different. And I've definitely embraced it at this stage. And I always say that ADHD is like one of the biggest gifts that I ever could have been gifted.
You mentioned make it fun, right? So is that when you think about why you choose to do something, just you're just like, hey, how can I make this fun for myself? Like, is the ADHD is a word that gets thrown around. I don't know if you've been formally diagnosed or if you're self-diagnosing, right? And I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs kind of self-diagnose themselves as ADHD. And at the end of the day, I've heard so many different versions of it. Like, it's a gift. Actually, what I have is a focus problem, not an attention problem. I got lots of attention. I just, putting it in one place for a long, right? So different takes on this. But what do you think that other entrepreneurs who maybe don't have ADHD, or however you want to phrase it, what do you think, or even if they do have ADHD, but they're not comfortable putting themselves out there just to get attention, right? Just to like do crazy stuff just to get eyes on them so that then they actually have the opportunity to give the message. Where do you think they go wrong? Like, what is it that you did that came at that they're not doing?
I think it starts with just like removing your like care for what anybody thinks initially, because like I said, like society tries to put you in a box as to like how you should behave and how you should conduct business. But if you just follow that blueprint, you're just going to follow the same blueprint that your competitors are following or whatnot. So like my mindset with like a lot of the things that I do is like, what can I do to stand out like right now? And like, obviously, like Procter and Gamble has a huge share over the market. And like, let's say you're running like a sub shop. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's a guy who runs a sub shop in Tampa. It's called Gateway Subs. And every single day he posts like crazy content with, he'll sponsor pool parties at U Tampa and play catch with wrapped subs and, throw them around, and he'll get a lot of views on those types of videos. Like, I think that it depends on what type of brand you're running. Obviously, if you're running like an accounting firm, it's like there's a little bit less flexibility, and depends on the customer that you're going after. But I can't like break it down to a science. You just have to not care what people think, and then I don't know how to like.
Let me ask you, right? So there has to be an element of it which is authentic in a way. So it's not like you decided that if it wasn't for Dirty Bastard, you'd still be walking around in a green tux and a cowboy hat, right? Like you'd be walking around in something else. But there's something that must draw you to saying, I need eyes on me and I'm really comfortable doing whatever feels like it's fun to me, you know what I mean? But still feels authentic, because I think where a lot of entrepreneurs get tripped up, it's like, oh, I got to do that thing to get attention. I don't feel comfortable doing that, right? And I don't even know if it's because of the judgment that others will put on them as much as it's their own judgment that gets in the way.
Yeah, I think it comes, I think it's external because, if you actually like want your business to succeed and you know that you could take an action that would help your business succeed and help, the business to stand out and to draw eyes and gain attention, I think the only thing that, you know, would be holding an entrepreneur back is the fear of what other people might say. And, maybe I'm wrong about that, but once you can kind of remove yourself from that, like from that mind frame where it's like, I don't really care
I,
about, yeah,
I think they when they say when you say if you knew you could do something that would make your business succeed, I think your average entrepreneur goes, I don't think dressing up in a green jacket and a hat is going to make my business succeed. And they're wrong, right?
yeah,
They're wrong. But
yeah,
that's the what they don't have the conviction about, is that I need to get eyes on my business. And they're worried about the reputation of their business. I mean, you mentioned an accounting firm. I'm sure you could do an outlandish marketing scheme for an accounting firm. Like, you could find some way to kind of, I don't know, pretend you're a money laundering company or some stupid thing that'll get people's attention. You know what I mean? Be like, no, no, no. What we actually do is, or something like that. But
like if you look at Morgan and Morgan,
yeah,
there are billboards that say size matters, and they actually do something which is I think is pretty awesome regionally, where there are billboards in Tampa of John Morgan dressed up like a pirate
yeah.
and join our crew or something like that. And they do that like all throughout the country. So like yes, there are ways to do it. I think it just comes down to a willingness to like step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done. But yeah, I mean, I saw it work for the Savannah Bananas. Like that's the thing is like I would in building this brand, I would take tiny bits and pieces of aspects that I've seen work for other brands and apply it to my own. Like for example, everything is interconnected. So this cowboy hat, I was looking at other brands that like men, kind of associate with or are drawn to. And Stetson is this cowboy hat is a Stetson. My friend gave it to me and he gave me the box. And on the back of the box, there's like a cowboy like feeding his horse water from his Stetson. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. Like I wanted to incorporate some artwork into my box. So if you see on the back of our Dirty
Hmm.
Bastard box, you'll see that I took little components of all these brands that have always spoke very well to men. So like this is like a not exactly the Marlboro man, but a Marlboro type of
Yeah, yeah.
man, hyper masculine guy. This is I don't know if I can say that it's exactly the Budweiser horse. It's not exactly the Budweiser horse, but Budweiser has used horses in their campaigns for a long time. This mountain worked for Coors, and that's a depiction of Coors
Yeah,
Mountain.
yeah.
I have to be careful. It's not exactly
No,
Coors
no,
Mountain.
you're taking bits of inspiration and making it your own, right? Like, you're saying, oh, what appeals to men? Pioneering. Great. I'm going to put a pioneer out there. Cowboys. Great. Let's give them a hat. Horses, right? And you're just kind of piling that on.
My mentality with this is I'm not trying to market it as if it is a laundry detergent company. I'm marketing it as if it is like the best beer ever.
Right.
And that's kind of been my mentality with this is like market it like it's
Okay.
our brand voice aligns far closer to Anheuser-Busch than it does to Tide.
You talked about getting outside of your comfort zone. So, do you still feel uncomfortable stepping outside of your comfort zone, or have you done enough of it now where it just comes really naturally and you're like, yeah, I'm happy to do it, not a problem?
Yeah. I mean, there's always like the little voice in the back of your head that's like, this is how is this going to be received? But now it's more so, how is my audience going to receive this?
Okay.
Because I'm seeing it more from the audience's perspective because the identity of the brand has, already been built to a certain extent. And I do have to be like more strategic about like now that it's, kind of the identity already exists. I have to be strategic about what I am willing to add to it. And, if, certain things are like they just need to align as I'm, you know, anything that I put outward to our audience, I have to be mindful of how that resonates with them. But I mean, for the tuxedo, I've just become used to wearing it. I wear it, typically every day, if unless I'm like working at my desk. I'm usually wear shorts. But yeah,
What was it like? Walk me through what was it like the first time you put it on and went outside? Like, what do you remember that vividly?
I do. And I went to this gas station that I always go to, and the clerk at the gas station's like, what's the occasion? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what the occasion is. Like, I just told him, like, oh, I started the business, and then I told him about I told him about Dirty Bastard and whatnot. But I don't think there necessarily has to be an occasion. And the fact that people will ask you stuff like that is like, that's your cold open, like that's your,
Yeah.
basically, like that's them opening the door for you to tell them about your brand. And that happens all the time. Like, I'll just be walking, hey, I like your cowboy hat. Hey, I like your, I like your suit. I like your fit or whatever, and that's just the opener for me to be able to talk about my brand. And, the first time I stepped out of the house, it was somewhat of an uncomfortable experience, but I got used to it after, because I love talking about the brand. So the more I realized that it was, opening the door for me to talk about the brand, it became exciting for me.
Well, I love that you put the outfit on and just went outside. It's not like you put the outfit on to go to a marketing event. You just put it on and went outside and saw what happened. You know what I mean? And people responded, and then you just built on that. So it's such a great way to say, okay, I may feel uncomfortable to go put this on and create social media, or to put this on and go give a talk. But can I just put it on and go out for a drive, go get some gas? Can I just put it on and go get some gas and see what happens? That's interesting. I like that. It's such a nice little baby step.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't like throw myself immediately into the fire. Like, I was kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
I just wanted to see how people like, I do care what people think. So, you just have to see how people receive it and, make tweaks.
If it wasn't received well, you probably would have tried something else, right? You probably would have dumped it and moved on to something else. I want to touch on what you talked about with Procter and Gamble, because I think, I don't know if it was an investor or who it was that asked you what happens if Procter and Gamble comes up with something tomorrow, but I think the fact that they own 35% of the market, and everything I've seen from water brands to fitness brands to laundry brands, is that these companies now just wait for a small brand to come along, do the marketing work, prove the brand, and then they just buy it. And they're really not interested in working from the ground up and launching a brand new brand. They may do a variation. They may say, hey, we have a thing, so we'll do a slightly different, we'll do a lemon scent as opposed to a lavender scent, or something like that. But I don't really see these big companies going into trying to reinvent categories anymore.
I feel like that's the thing too, is like they've just become so wildly successful, and they, it would cost more for them to build it themselves than it would be to buy it already built. And, there's far less margin for error if you can look at the balance sheet of a company that's, doing, 300, 400, even $500 million a year, and say, okay, you guys are, growing this percent year over year. Everything looks clean here. Let's just buy it and, take it to, $700 million in yearly revenue, as opposed to investing, millions of dollars in actually starting it and, hiring teams to manage it. I feel like it just makes more sense for them to just sit back, continue to make billions of dollars, and just, I spoke to somebody, and you're not even considered an ankle biter to Procter and Gamble unless you're making $100 million a year. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how much money these people make.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? Because it's not just you, although I don't know if anybody else trying to get into this area, but it's not just you trying to reinvent a category within their portfolio. So they're like, great, let all these people have at it. It's a competition as far as they're concerned, and the winner gets to be bought by them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And you're absolutely right. They'll buy that on a multiple of cash flows. They'll do the math, and they're like, with our distribution, we could blow this up, right? So they practically get their money back almost immediately from the growth that they see in the first few years, and then it's just another line item on their huge portfolio. So, do you have any? Are you already lining up thoughts about an exit? Are you already thinking about who to approach and building relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely know I want to exit. I don't know to who. Unilever, I know, is the company that bought Procter and bought Dr. Squatch. Procter and Gamble, has obviously a stronghold over the laundry market. But yeah, the goal is to exit within 5 to 6 years for hopefully upwards of $100 million. That would be awesome. But yeah, I want to build it first before before. I mean, obviously it's good to have the vision in mind, but
It's just the relationships, right? Have the vision, have the relationships. You're not obligated to sell that to anybody at any point in time, right? But if those people are watching you, you know what I mean. Then when the time comes, maybe it makes it a little easier. I don't know. Um, but I think at some point you keep doing what you're doing. I don't see that as a. I see that as very very likely outcome for you and what's going on here, man. You're a really inspiring story here.
that would be nice. That would be nice to make 100 million, or probably wouldn't be 100 million. I wouldn't make 100 million, but it would be nice to have a couple million at 26 years old.
It
That
would
would be
be great. It would be great.
yeah.
Walk us through your earlier journey. I know you had a podcast at some point. I know that you worked for more social media influencers. Like, tell us a little bit about how you got here.
So I am big into. I'll start from like the very beginning. Like during COVID, I started to listen to a lot of like business like YouTubers like Alex Hormozy and Gary Vaynerchuk and those types of people. And one of their biggest emphases was work for free until it makes sense to pay you, and to get experience, to build network and whatnot. So I really took that to like I just took that to heart because my mentality was I know nothing about, I know nothing about anything. I mean, I was a 17-year-old or 16-year-old high schooler. And in order to gain experience, I just started to offer to work for free for, like local gyms and whatnot. And I started to do social media and content creation. And then after my senior football season, I thought I was going to go play Division 1 sports. Turns out I'm not nearly as big enough, and I wasn't nearly as skilled enough, which was a little bit tough to hear. And I wanted to remain in sports, so I started to do some refereeing work. And I was like, God, this job sucks. Like my dad's a referee, a football referee, and it's a very thankless job, and it's very boring. And you're kind of just standing there, and you're not really involved with the game in the capacity that I desired to be involved in it with. So probably 2 to 3 months after my senior football season, I decided that I wanted to start my own podcast and interview athletes in my community, primarily Division 1 athletes in my community, to talk to them about their athletic journey, talk to them about their recruiting process. Because one of the biggest things is, I played offensive line, and my training regimen, I was following Rocky's training regimen because, if it worked for Rocky, it would work for me. But I guess I didn't necessarily have access to the knowledge and the information and the resources that I would have liked to be able to have access to. And, hindsight's always 2020, but like if I had a platform where I could, hear about the stories of other people's athletic journeys directly from them, I would have been in a better position to
Yeah.
go play myself. And I just started to interview people. And then I went to the University of Tampa because of like, I'm from Massachusetts. So the sports community in Massachusetts, or high school sports community, is not, massive in the way that it is in Florida. I mean, so many NFL players, Ray Lewis, Lamar Jackson, who else is from Florida? There's so many NFL players from the state of Florida. I think who else? Or maybe Earl Campbell, or there's just so many. But also IMG Academy is in close proximity to Tampa, and I knew that there were so many, Division 1 athletes that came out of IMG Academy. And I, started to expand and, continued to do the podcast as I was a freshman at the University of Tampa. And, I realized that, trying to do a podcast like full time, I wasn't really making any money. I went broke. But through the podcast, I was able to use it as an excuse to network and, sit down with somebody that I really had no business talking to for upwards of an hour, just because, it's giving them a platform to tell their story and whatnot. And I was able to, leverage some of those experiences to start to work for these people for free. So one of my buddies, his name is Bartley. He's a professional eater and a professional bodybuilder. And I just offered him one day after a podcast, I was like, hey, I'd love to like help you out with your content for free. And I started to do his content for free, and he has like a large following. So I think he has like over 300,000 followers now at this point. And, obviously I wasn't as good as him at it or the people that he worked with, but he was able to give me that direct, guidance and, he was able to be like, hey, I like the concept that you were going with here, but I would use this text style as opposed to the one that I was using previously. And through that, like, back and forth constant revisions, I was able to develop my skills in doing social media. And also he was very kind to introduce me to his network. And I was able to meet Derek Lunsford, who is the current Mr. Olympia champion. And I did a little bit of work with him. And, I've had some pretty cool opportunities just because I always say yes to any opportunity. I never would turn. Now I'm becoming a little bit more, I mean, I kind of have to be, but as a freshman, I literally had nothing to lose. Like it was my meals were paid for. I was on a campus meal plan. Like, I wasn't really going out, and I could just say yes to everything. And I worked for free for Bartley for, I think, maybe it was like 6 months approximately. And then it got to the point where he actually introduced me to one of his sponsors. And through that, I was working at a restaurant in Tampa, and I was walking to like the little trolley that would take me to Ybor. It was called Tampa Bay Brewing Company. I worked there as like a busboy, making, I think it was like $14 an hour or something like that. And his sponsor, after I did some work with them, they were like, we'll pay you triple what you're getting paid at this restaurant to quit your job right now and fly to Hawaii to film some content for us at their headquarters in Hawaii. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, no, yeah, that sounds great to me. So they flew me to, I believe it was Maui. Yeah, it was Maui. And I did some content with them. The company's called Jazzercise. They make this like product where you chew on it. And I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world because they were paying me to think it was the coolest thing in the world. Now it's like, whatever. But they offered me, after this was at the beginning of the summer. So I think it was probably 3 years ago at this point. And they offered me a full-time job to drop out of college and to be their creative director, like full-time creative director. And that seemed like the coolest thing in the world because I was getting to travel, and they sent me to the ESPYs in Los Angeles, and I got to shoot some content with Tommy DeVito, who's he's the quarterback. Actually, he's on the Patriots now. I'm a Patriots fan, but at that time he was on the Giants. And I just got to do so many cool things, and they flew me to Chicago, Myrtle Beach, and I was just making content for them, and they loved it, and they just wanted me to drop out. And I had, at that moment in my life, I was like, it seemed like the most attractive thing in the world. Like that felt like my Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl theme, well, I'm a big football fan, so the Super Bowl theme is reoccurring, where like when I say Super Bowl, it felt like the biggest possible opportunity that could be presented to me. And in expressing that to my parents, who had just invested, $50,000 in 1 year of my college education, they said, this is your Super Bowl today. But just imagine if you were to hold out and, just continue to do what you're doing. You're able to do this in one summer. The opportunities are only going to get bigger from here. And I had to kind of stand back for a second and reflect upon that and realize that they were right, because, I just picked up a camera, 8 months prior, or maybe like, yeah, 8 months prior to this experience. And then I just went back to school, told them, I'm sorry, I can't do this with you guys. I need to finish my education and whatnot. And then sure enough, my parents were right. And so kind of going back to Derek Lunsford, he was the reigning Mr. Olympia at that point. He lost last year, but then won it back again this year. He offered me a full-time job offer to drop out of college and work for him full-time as a creative director, and travel with him to expos in Saudi Arabia, go to Dubai, go to Germany, South Korea, travel the world with him. And, he's like the face of bodybuilding, like modern bodybuilding. And that seemed like the most that was another Super Bowl moment for me. I was like, I'd been working with all these fitness influencers and athletes, and like, here's, the best bodybuilder or in the entire world that wants me to be his full-time, videographer and creative director. And I was very, very close to dropping out of college and accepting that opportunity. But once again, I had talked to my parents, and now at this point they're 2 years into paying for college. and I'm 1 year away from graduating because, we had a conversation with my parents where it's like, if you want to go ahead and like, if you don't want to do college, why don't you just accelerate your college experience and, take extra classes. So I had started doing that at that point.
So not only were you working for free, helping different people, or maybe now you're getting paid, but you're also doubling up on class loads in order to be able to finish faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I had, so like it started with me saying yes to every opportunity, but then it's just, that got me to the point where, some opportunities I couldn't just say yes. I had, obviously it would require a tremendous amount of sacrifice. And after I said no to Derek, and he's still a good friend of mine at this point, and I've been able to work with him and not have had to have dropped out of college. I thought that it was either one or the other, but it didn't end up being that way. My cousin had sent me a Twitter post from John Gruden, he had just been onboarded as a Barstool personality, and he said that he was looking for a full-time creative director in Tampa. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that would be super cool. So I just filled out the application, and I think it was maybe 2 to 3 days later. And I expected nothing from this because, it's Barstool, it's John Gruden. At this point I was a sophomore in college, and I had some relevant experience, but nothing crazy. And 2 to 3 days later, I get an email back. Hey, you've been selected as one of our final candidates. Please come for an in-person interview at this location. You're going to meet with one of our Barstool executives. I'm like, okay, please prepare a 5-minute presentation as to why you should be selected for the job. So I prepare my 5-minute presentation, and I'm rehearsing it like over and over and over again. So I show up to this location, and there's me and 7 other guys. And some of them were current Barstool employees that were working as interns that wanted a full-time role. Some of them were former ESPN, like Red Zone producers. And if you've ever watched NFL Red Zone, it's like, that's a pretty legitimate production to manage. You have like 8 NFL football games going on at the same time, and you're cutting back and forth between those. And I was 19 years old, and I'm like, hey, I've worked for free for these people and had some cool opportunities to drop out of college and do like some cool videography work. And I give I walk into the presentation room, and the Barstool executive that I was meeting with was Dave Portnoy, and there were probably 5 or 6 cameras pointed at me as I walk into the room. And sitting next to Dave is John Gruden, and here I am, 19 years old, going up against these ESPN guys, and one of them was like the videographer for the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm like, all right, well, let me just give it my best shot here. And my voice was shaky, my knees were like jello. I was like stuttering over my words, but in that moment, like, and there's a video on YouTube of it too. It's kind of funny. It was like a 15-minute conversation, but of course they only put the part in where I got dry mouth, asked for water, and stumbled over my words and made me look like an idiot. But that experience was super awesome because like that was a Super Bowl moment for me. Not in terms of like, I didn't get the job. Some guy that worked for the Cowboys got the job. But the stakes of me pitching myself and presenting literally could not be any higher, because if we go all the way back, I started my own sports media platform podcast, largely inspired by Barstool Sports. And, we even made flags that were like similar to Barstool, not like exact copies, like just embracing that college lifestyle and whatnot. And, I'm from Massachusetts. Dave Portnoy is from Massachusetts. And I'm like, we come from a similar area. We come from a similar educational background. Like, if he can do it, I can do it. And that was like a Super Bowl moment for me because, to walk into that room and have to pitch myself. And, that was just a crazy experience. And while I didn't get the job from that, I was able to leverage that experience to, to go do more. And actually, after I had interviewed, I told Dave, I was like, hey, listen, I'm like, I'm doing my own podcast and stuff. I've been super inspired by you. And then he told me, he's like, how old are you? You're 19 years old. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, you're a lot farther ahead than I was at 19 years old. And hearing that coming from him was like, that stuck with me, and it
Mm-hmm.
has continued to stick with me. And um, yeah, and I've just, continued to work my way up. And there was probably between that Barstool opportunity that I had got rejected from and the Jake Paul opportunity that I got in around a year ago today, actually. Um, that was like a period of building for me. I was just building and, trying to, gain more experience and try to get myself to the point where I could, graduate and then say yes to a massive opportunity.
Were you worried at that point that you had passed up on two huge opportunities? Now you just kind of didn't get the thing you wanted to get. Are you now starting to question yourself and doubt yourself and be like, where do I go? What's going on in your mind at that point?
Yeah, definitely. And so that Barstool thing happened in December of 2024, 2024. And from December of 2024, or no, not, yeah, December of 2024 to May of 2025, it was like very much of a lull period for
Yeah.
me. And I was kind of just like doing some work for local gyms. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said no to those opportunities because, it's not like they come by every single day. And I'd actually taken a job. I wanted to like go 100% in on content and like start my own marketing agency and do, more work for those gyms and actually have like contracts and whatnot. And, I couldn't bring myself to organize that whole thing. So I just took a job working at Lifetime in Tampa as a pickleball coordinator. So I would just stand under this umbrella for 5-6 hours a day and check people into the pickleball courts. And the biggest thing about Lifetime, and part of the reason why I wanted to get a job there, is because there were a lot of high net worth individuals that are always coming through that facility. It's I think there's like $1,000 initial deposit to get a membership, and then it's like $300-$400 a month after that. So obviously a lot of people that are members there have their own businesses and whatnot. So I figured that would be a good opportunity for me to be able to network with those people. And I also got 3 free guest passes a month. And I said, okay, sure, I could maybe bring some of my buddies and get them to work out with me a day or two a month. And I did that for the first month. But the way that Lifetime memberships work, or the guest passes work, is you can only bring the same person once every 2 months. So after I brought my friends, I'm like, I have 3 free guest passes this month. How am I going to use these? I definitely want to use them. And then I started to think that I could use it as somewhat of a form of like currency,
Mm-hmm.
almost,
Mm-hmm.
where it's an excuse to get somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily have a Lifetime membership that I want to network with or connect with.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have a Lifetime guest pass if you want to come get a workout with me. So there is a popular influencer who's now a very, very close friend of mine, Tampa Terrence. And we had DM'd back and forth a few times, and he knew that I like created content and whatnot. But we had never had like a real conversation. And I asked him, I just DM'd him. I'm like, hey, I have this Lifetime guest pass if you want to, hit a workout with me this week. And he's like, yeah, sure. Like, let's go.
Cool.
So we go through our workout and whatnot, and we're in the cold plunge, and he gets a FaceTime call from a unknown number. And I'm like, he answers it. It's Jake Paul. Hey, Terrence, we've seen your application. We love your content. We'd love to hire you as a content creator for us this summer, or as an intern this summer. Can you be in Los Angeles tomorrow? And he's all excited, jumping up and down, and he's like, hey, I gotta go pack my bags to go to LA tomorrow. I'm like, well, that was pretty cool to like have seen Jake Paul on FaceTime, but now Terrence, he's gone for the summer. He's going to work for Jake Paul. He's going to LA. And I was a little bummed about that, but me and Terrence had just been texting back and forth. I was asking him, how's the internship, how's everything going, and just staying close. And after about a week and a half, after Terrence had left, I was thinking, this just sucks. Like I feel like I had taken a step backward. I mean, the
Yeah.
previous summer I was in Hawaii at the SBs, like doing all this, crazy stuff that, was like an awesome experience. And I just turned that down because I thought I could do more. And now I'm working at a gym for $15 or $17 an hour. and doing nothing. So I had a bad day at work, 2 weeks after I had hung out with Terrence, and I called Terrence on my drive back from work. I said, hey, listen, you've seen the stuff that I've done. You know that I interviewed with Barstool. You know that, I've been doing content for a while. Do you guys need a creative director or videographer on this RV road trip? He goes, yeah, we actually might. Let me call our boss right now, and then I'll get back to you. And maybe 15, 20 minutes later, I get a phone call back. Hey, listen, yeah, they love your work. Can you send over some of these like more specific
Yeah.
styles of videos that you've done before? So I sent them over, and the next day, Terrence calls me back. Hey, can you be in New York tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, of course I can be in New York tomorrow. So I quit my job at Lifetime that same day that I got that phone call, and they were like, "Are you not going to give it 2 weeks notice?" I'm like, I didn't have 2 weeks notice. So like, it's just one of those things. I do feel bad about, just kind of like leaving on a whim like that. And, they were already short staffed. So I just kind of burned that bridge with them a little bit. But, um, I got to New York. We were parked in some RV park in Brooklyn, which is exactly what you would imagine it to be, an RV park in the middle of Brooklyn. It was pretty disgusting, but we went from New York to Philadelphia, and we filmed a collaboration with a pretty big influencer. He like catches marshmallows in his mouth. I don't know, maybe you've seen it, but he's got like over 1 million followers, and we filmed a collaboration with him in Philadelphia. And then we went to Greenville, North Carolina, to Mr. Beast's headquarters, which is like he has over 500 on-site employees in Greenville, North Carolina. And we did some videos over there, and then we went to Nashville, went up to Ohio, went to Minnesota, and we just like did 40 states in 50 days. And every day was something new, every day was something super dynamic. We actually hung out with a lot of Mormons in Utah, which was pretty awesome. Mormons are, I had like a stigma in my head about like what it was to be Mormon, but like they are like the nicest and coolest people in the world. And that's kind of when we started to take that Red Bull approach to the marketing strategy, is when we were hanging out with a lot of Mormons, because they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't like do anything that's like mind altering. They don't even drink coffee or tea because of the caffeine. But what they do like to do is jump off of stuff. And every Mormon that I knew or met knew how to do a backflip and was willing to jump off the highest structure into water below, because it gave them that like adrenaline rush. And I that was a super cool experience too. Um, but at once I got back to Tampa after being on the RV, um, I just kind of went immediately back to class, and I was in my entrepreneurship classes, and they were taking us through the like how to create new idea, or
Yep.
generating ideas, like that framework. I don't even remember necessarily what the framework was called, but I remember the first step in that framework being gather raw materials, gather new information. And I had just gathered a ridiculous amount of information like this summer, and
Hmm.
I didn't have time to like to process it. I mean, it was one thing out one day after the other, one just constant. I didn't even have time to like just relax at all. Um, but I started to undergo that process of generating new ideas and whatnot, and I was able to leverage the experience that I had this summer to start to like I said, explore how I could create a product that was like how to fill a gap in the market with a masculine identity. Um, and then obviously I came up with laundry detergent, started to design the logo, immediately jumped right into it. Um,
Was that all part of the class? Did this happen as part of the class, or was this outside of class now?
I had a marketing class that was
Okay.
separate from entrepreneurship. And one of our class assignments was to take a product that already existed and remarket it to a new audience. And like she gave us like a list of
Okay.
things. It was like shoes for geriatrics, like glasses for like I don't know. It was like she
Yep.
gave us a list, and at the bottom it said like, or create your own idea.
Yeah.
I wanted to create my own idea because I'm just entrepreneurial.
Yep.
I started to think, and I underwent that process of generating new ideas and whatnot. And Obviously, I looked at the laundry detergent market, realized that there was no masculine identity in that market, and then I latched onto it. That was September of 2025.
So pretty
And
much the beginning of your senior year,
yeah.
right?
So actually this summer too, I was doing I did a statistics class while in the RV so that I could have senior standing for this semester,
Okay.
or for this year. So I kind of like skipped my junior year basically.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I started to explore, I designed the logo. The product was called Lavo, and it was laundry pods for men. And like the branding was like not really that differentiated. It was just like blue, and it
Yeah.
had like a volcanic vibe to it. Um, but I carried that, like, I think I got like 100 on the project, I just felt like there was actually something there with the
Hmm.
concept. Um, so I carried it to my other entrepreneurship classes the following, or no, it was the same semester, where we actually had to build like a feasibility analysis. And at that point, like we built out like a full feasibility analysis and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, wait, like this is feasible. Like it doesn't require a ridiculous amount of capital. It doesn't.
Hmm.
I have the skills that I need to, develop the branding at least, and then everything else I can, figure out as I go. So I designed the branding, and the Lavo concept with the pods, like it just didn't feel right. Like the concept of laundry for men felt right, but in studying that, Tide has 35% of the US, or Procter and Gamble has 35% of the US market, like everybody's like, oh, we're going to make a disruptive brand, but you know in order to actually be disruptive, I thought like Lavo is just not disruptive. It doesn't really stand out from anything else on the shelf. So if I wanted to build a disruptive brand, why not be fundamentally disruptive in terms of the brand voice and
Hmm.
the name of the brand itself? So people always ask me how I came up with the name Dirty Bastard. Is like I don't know. I really don't know how that happened, but it just like came into my head one day, and I was like I feel like this, you know, this like resonates,
Yeah.
and it stands out in a very unique way. So I had designed the logo and whatnot, and you know, we had like a competition. It was called the Fall Venture Showcase, where all of the entrepreneurship students at the University of Tampa, made a little expo style, like a little board, and showcased some their business concept. So I had designed the logo. I printed out a little like a piece of paper, and I had glued it to a box of dryer sheets.
Yeah.
I was just showcasing my product at this showcase, and there were judges that came around, and people were like, "Oh, that's cool, whatever." And I just like was just talking about it as if I was just trying to win the competition, because you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
win $1,000 if you won. So I was like, that'd be super cool. But I didn't win the competition. Some other group won, and I was actually pretty bummed out. And there was this event going on in the center of campus. It was with the sports marketing department, or the sports management department. They were doing some like a picture like field day at like high school or whatnot, and it was some games going on in the lawn. And one of the professors of the sports management department, I had interacted with her because I was trying to bring back UTampa football, because UTampa had a pretty good football team in I think it was like the 70s or whatnot, but then they got rid of the program and defunded
Hmm.
everything. But I had started the campaign to bring back UTampa football, and I had got like 2,000 signatures, and I had got her feedback on that, and she's like, honestly, I think I like your work ethic, but I just don't think it's feasible with where the university is currently aligning their goals, and they're very into like more of the academic objectives and whatnot at this stage.
Hmm.
So I had interacted with her through that experience, and I told her about, I still had like this little box with me, and I was telling her about Dirty Bastard and how I didn't win the competition, and she's like, oh, I love it, like that's awesome. And then I started to tell her about how I worked for Jake Paul this summer, and um, she's like, this is great, like I think you should have won, like what do you need to make it happen? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't have a number. I didn't have anything. Um, she goes, all right, I'll give you $5,000 for half a percent for 0.5% of the company. I'm like, sounds good to me. Like that's like what is it? $1 million valuation, or I mean, not that it meant anything at that time, but yeah, $5,000 for 0.5% of the company. She's like, have a contract, bring me the contract, and then I'll sign it. And I was like, $5,000 for 0.5%. Like that seems like, that I I gave her 1% because I felt like that was such a good gesture of her to, want to invest in me at that stage. And she goes, I thought I said 0.5%. I go, oh, like I just want to do 1% because you're taking a chance on me. She goes, all right, I'll give you $10,000 for 1%. And I'm like, all right, like, okay, yeah, sure. So she gave me that $10,000 for the 1%. And it was like, we didn't even have a contract, for the 1%. Like she just like ended up giving it to me, and she's like, just make it work.
Yeah.
But she's been like awesome. And, a couple weeks later, she's like, I want to give you more money, but I think we should like restructure and like come up with, some sort of like equity agreement where it makes a little bit more sense. I was like, all right, I gave her 10%. And since then she's given me, I think, $45,000 to get it off the ground and going, which is like, that's pretty, it's been a pretty awesome experience. I'm very lucky to have somebody like that that has been willing to take the chance on me like
Believe
that.
in you. Just,
Yeah.
believe in you, and kind of so blatantly just be like, here, what do you need to make it work? Let me just be of service to that.
That was on November 19th that we had that conversation. And all I had was the logo and the box that I had glued to, or
Hmm.
the makeshift box. And maybe it was in December, I got a DM from the woman that had showcased Mr. Beast's headquarters in Greenville, North Carolina. And she reached out and said, hey, are you still in school? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, we'd love for you to actually drop out of college and work for us full time at the Mr. Beast headquarters in Greenville, North Carolina as a creative director. And being in content, like that is the Super Bowl. Like
Yep.
that's the Super Bowl. Unless you have your own brand and like you become Mr. Beast, like he has, I think it's like 200 something million subscribers on YouTube, most subscribed to YouTuber in the entire world. But in that moment, I had just received money for this product that I had been designing, and like I couldn't say yes to that. As attractive as it was to be like, okay, Mr. Beast, like to be able to learn from him and just have that experience, like that would just be so awesome. Also, I was able to look at it where it's like he has 500 employees on site in Greenville, North Carolina. I'm really going to be like nothing to him. Maybe I'll get to work with him sometimes, but the majority of like the creative director role that they had laid out to me was like, you're coming up with ideas, and then we'll implement the ideas in our production process. Um, but yeah, that was a crazy experience for me to like be put in that position at that stage. But it also, the analogy that I make with that experience too is like, imagine you have a crush on a girl for years, and then you find out that she finally likes you and she starts giving you attention back. The magic and mystique of the chase, like the thrill of the chase, almost like goes away a little bit, especially if you're a younger college student, right? It just felt like I knew that that opportunity like was there for me. Like I knew that I had done the work to be able to afford myself that opportunity. And then when it was put in front of me, I was like, do I actually want to, drop out of college, leave everything, leave all my friends
At
behind?
the
And
11th hour, right? Now you've
yeah,
done the work. You're in your final year.
yeah. And I said no to that opportunity, and I went all in on Dirty Bastard, and, started to talk to manufacturers, go back and forth, have them send us some samples of sheets. And, we work with a fragrance lab to send the fragrances over to our manufacturer, have them infuse them into the sheets. And it was, a process. But, looking back, it was, what's today's, it's almost May. This all started really started in November,
Hmm.
however many months that is. It's like 7 months, maybe, or 8 months. Um, so I've just had to move very, very quickly with it. And, we placed our first inventory order. It's supposed to arrive, you know, literally any day now. The product is launching on May 9th, which is the same day that I graduate. And we've just had some super cool opportunities to, market this product in a very fun and unique way.
Did you do a
So,
pre-order or what did you do to
so we did a pre-launch on Kickstarter, um, and we set a 30-day campaign goal of $10,000. And in my mind, I'm like, $300 a day, 330 dollars a day over 30 days. Like that seems pretty ambitious. That would be a challenge. I like a good challenge, so I'm like, okay, that's fine. And this summer, one of the most successful social media campaigns that we had, and this was something that we could literally do anywhere, was writing the name of every new follower gained on our RV in Sharpie. So we were driving around like, you guys
Mhm.
can travel the country with us because we'll put your name on the RV. And that was something, it was obviously, it took a lot of work to write all those people's names on the RV, but I think we gained like 10,000 followers from that series alone. And I had, this is around the time that I had actually met you. I had this washing
Mhm.
machine.
Mhm.
I certainly can't afford to, buy a $60,000 30-foot Winnebago, but instead, I knew that I needed something like that to get people engaged because I just saw how successful that campaign was. So I went on Facebook Marketplace, bought a top-loaded washing machine for $50, got a dolly, put it on a dolly, paid somebody at UTampa's printing lab to. I paid him $20 to print out like a full, like poster board that was massive. That then we bought some adhesive spray from Walmart, and we just put the adhesive where we put the wrap on the washing machine, and it looked pretty good. And then for 2 weeks I was pushing the washing machine around campus, you know, handing out free sandwiches, partnering with local companies, like just finding unique ways to get the student community engaged. And at this
Mhm.
point, we had our samples, so I was doing a lot of like street interview style content with, this is street interviews, like one of my favorite content styles because I just like love like going up to like random people and talking to them, especially if it's my own product. Because I've done it for like that's what I was doing for Jazzercise, is that like street interview style content, and it wasn't even my product, but I just like loved the novelty of speaking to somebody new every 30
Yep.
seconds. That's where my ADHD comes into play too, because it's like new stimulus, sign me up. Like it's perfect. But yeah, we had made like the washing machine like a universally recognized symbol of the brand in the same way that the WRV was. Obviously, not at the same scale, but that was kind of my philosophy, was make this washing machine famous on Instagram, and that we were able to do that. And then when we launched our Kickstarter campaign, I announced that we're going to be writing the name of every Kickstarter backer on the washing machine in Sharpie, and I use the exact same format of the campaign that we did with W, like word almost word for word, because we had if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
change a little bit. And within 48 hours, we had fully funded our Kickstarter campaign. So $10,000 in 48 hours. I think the first 24 hours was 8,500,
Yeah.
and it
I
was like
remember that.
I was like, holy crap! Like it absolutely blew my mind. And now that washing machine has like remained a staple of the brand, and we still push it around campus. Like for example, this Wednesday, I'm partnering with the same sub shop that we were giving free sandwiches away. Again on Wednesday to do the same thing. But now people that follow us on Instagram could have their name written on the washing machine, or just ride that until basically it's dead, or until we have an RV of our own, and then we can do at a bigger scale. Um, but yeah, that was a super, super validating experience. Was to like almost like the craziest experience of my life, was to have spent the last 6 months at that point working on something and then have it validated almost immediately. And I was like, holy crap! Like I knew there was something there, but not at that scale.
Just going all in too is a pivotal moment there, right? Like you're like, I'm passing on this opportunity, this huge opportunity for the third time, you know what I mean? And so like I better go all in, and so I imagine that, I don't know if that happened immediately for you or gradually, but I imagine that decision is probably what has you here today, is that desire to go all in and just be like, I'm doing this.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, I knew that my window of, leniency as like a student was closing very rapidly as well. And the deal that I have with my parents is like, right now they like help me with like my rent and stuff, but they say the day you graduate, like it's all you. So that sense of urgency is obviously like breathing down my neck. Even still, like, you know, I mean, life is expensive, and to be dependent upon a startup for all of my living expenses is somewhat of a nerve wracking experience. But we're gonna figure it out as we go. But
Well, that's why people raise money, right? And that's why there's, so I think, I'm guessing you'll be leaps and bounds from where you are today in 6 months, because there's something about you, there's something about the product. And I think it's really easy from the outside for somebody to be like, oh, you got lucky. But I just finished listening to your whole story. There's nothing but just work ethic. You could have been goofing off at frat parties drinking beer. You know what I mean? Like, instead, you were working for free or taking low paying jobs just to kind of make ends meet. So I see nothing but work ethic, somebody who's always on the hunt for something cool. And I really think that moment when you went all in, for me, it's that question I started with by asking you, like, you know, how do you feel comfortable just going out there and getting all of this attention? I think it's because you go all in and you're like, whatever it takes. You know what I mean? I'm no longer double thinking this. I'm not overthinking. It's just like, this is what it takes. Let's do it, and we'll deal with the consequences later. And
yeah,
and I think that kind of attitude is hard to learn, and you learned it really early, man.
yeah, my philosophy has just been like, I definitely like take to actually part of the thing too with like the like not being concerned with what other people have to say or what other people think is I have where is it? But I have this on my desk right here. It's The Man in the Arena
Hmm.
by Teddy Roosevelt, and that I believe it was a speech. I don't think it was a poem, but you just I mean I won't read it, but it's basically just
You
says that
can. It'll make a decent Instagram clip if you want to read
yeah, yeah,
it.
absolutely. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least failed while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And that speech has like been a huge guiding factor for me because like I'm too young to care about failing.
Hmm.
Like the sacrifices that I would like I don't have people that are financially dependent upon me. I don't have a mortgage to pay. I don't have, I don't even pay for my car insurance at this stage of my life. I am afforded the opportunity to dare greatly and to go ahead and not be afraid of failure because at this stage of my life, every every failure, like I could have viewed my Barstool Sports interview as a massive failure and a massive embarrassment because they embarrassed me in that YouTube video and made me look like a fool. And no, I just leveraged that experience to get to the next thing. And that was my biggest reason why I think I got the Jake Paul opportunity was I was one of I was one of eight final candidates out of 3,500 applicants for a full-time content producer role with Barstool Sports. Like that's the way I framed it.
Yeah.
Some people may see that as like, have that experience where they were, somewhat publicly embarrassed and just, never talk about it ever again and like make sure that nobody sees it. But like, I have no problem showing people that video and being like, this was my experience. And,
Hmm.
I messed up on, I don't even think I messed up. They just edited
It
it.
is. I hear what you're saying. Like, you could focus on the fact that you didn't get the job, or you
Yeah.
could focus on the fact that you were one of eight finalists out of a huge pool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, whatever you did, and some parts went well, some parts didn't. So what? So there's an artifact out there. You could wear it with a badge of honor, or you could hide from it. And so it feels like you
Yeah.
chose to wear it as a badge of honor.
Yeah. And like anybody who said anything like negative about that experience, like you just go back to the man in the arena, unless it was Dave Portnoy or one of the other candidates that, said that I did a horrible job or whatever, like, to hear criticism from somebody who didn't do the work to put themselves in that position, that it's almost meaningless in that sense where it's like, I'm the one who put the work in to even be afforded the opportunity to be in this position. So, yeah. And with my name being Maximus too, I definitely resonate with like, the gladiator mentality. So,
That would have been an alternative version of of the
yeah.
outfit here. You could have showed up in gladiator gear.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I have the physique for that, but
Well, Maximus, man, you are an inspiration. You keep doing exactly what you're doing. Not only are you succeeding, but I think you're inspiring people like me who are further along in their journey and they just see someone willing to give a shot at it and they see potential. And so I'm sure, the paths you cross, you'll have a lot of influence and a lot of support from the community. So man, Godspeed, and you're awesome. I wish you luck, and I don't even think you need it, but it's always good to have it.
no, I'll take it. I'll take it where I can get it.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That's another episode of the Wednesdays Off podcast. If you want to get this laundry detergent, the Dirty Bastard, where do you go?
GetDirtyBastard.com.
GetDirtyBastard.com. All right. Thanks, everybody.